morning, everybody. Happy Friday. And, always start with the good news. Sunday is February 1st. So goodbye to January. We won't miss it. Good Lord, it's been cold out there. So, let's dive right in. So, good morning, Brian. How are you?
How are you, Mike?
Doing well, thank you. And Andy?
How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well, thank you. So we've got a couple of guests that we'll get to as we get through their part of the slideshow here this morning. But we are delighted to have Ann Chapman is with us, Danielle Bosanec is with us, and Mike Koltes, the WASBO board president, is with us. Apparently, he's upset with the fact that we mentioned him last month under the WASBO naughty and nice list, and we had Mike Koltes' hair on the nice list. So Mike says he wants to be respected for more than just his hair. So good morning, Mike. We'll get to you guys in a few minutes. Um, Brian and Andy, I was going to say it must hurt to see all of your budget dollars going up the chimney with all this cold weather. But it occurs to me you guys have, I think, two of the most energy efficient school buildings in the state, if I remember this right. Andy, do you have a school? Is it Forest Edge?
Yep, Forest Edge is net zero. So, unfortunately, in the winter, you use a lot of electricity, pumping water into the ground. So, not anywhere near as bad as probably natural gas and electricity bills, but still quite a bit bigger than what they normally are. So,
So you have that school literally has no furnace, right?
correct. No boiler, no natural gas.
That's just
Does
crazy. I don't know. I would be terrified. And Brian, what's your new school?
Maplewood, and ours is also all electric, and those electric bills hurt a little bit in the winter time, but
Okay.
they'll come around.
Well, I guess nobody gets off, with that easily in Wisconsin winter. He's got to heat it somehow. Um, Well, so the theme for this Money Talks, first, thank you for joining us. This is sort of a recap of the state education convention that happened in Milwaukee last week. Everybody on our screen here this morning was at that conference. It was cold, and we paid for parking so that you don't have to. So you guys get to just get the highlights as a service for WASBO. So we've got some of the major news items and a little bit of the talk of the town that we picked up there, and a little bit of some of the WASBO presentations that went on. We had like a dozen or so WASBO presentations. They were always really well attended. There's really high interest from school board members and school finance and school operations. Um, so that's what we're going to cover. I want to thank and there's your usual panel and our big disclaimer saying, please don't sue us for anything that we might say. Um, in fact, yeah, there we go. So there's our lineup of topics. I want to open just by saying thank you to the mighty WASPO School Finance Puzzle Team, which does the pre-convention workshop, and Steve Summers heads that up every year. Steve Summers from Wanakee, the business manager, and um, and it's like a 3.5 hour marathon of explaining the basics of school funding and school finance to mostly new school board members. And after 3 hours and 15 minutes of them sitting there, we make um, Dan McCrae go on there and try to do like assessed versus equalized values. So we should give him some kind of an award for that. So yeah, so that's our plan for this morning. So even if you missed state ed, by the time we get through with this, you'll feel like you were there. So we did a couple of awards at the WASBO luncheon. So the first was Kelly Fassbender got the new business director of the year, and then Topher Adams got business manager of the year. I don't know why these slides are just scrolling past so quickly, but um, um, I think our award winners are like way more photogenic than Brian and Andy and I. So congratulations on winning those two awards. Nice to see Anna go. You know, uh, on the road to being a thriving school district after so many referendum woes. So we did those awards on Thursday, and when the conference opened the day before on Wednesday, and State Superintendent um, Jill Underly did a little mini keynote, as the state superintendent always does, and she mentioned the Northwest Territory in her opening comments and asked rhetorically if anybody had ever heard of the Northwest Territory. And since I'm a history nerd and Danielle teaches or taught history, we were both doing our best Hermione Granger with our hands up, waving like we, I know. Um, and so the reason that the state superintendent mentioned this is that, so here's the background. So we all know the United States was the first ever um, modern constitutional democracy, right? That's oldest constitution in the world. That was our big claim to fame. Um, and but all those 13 colonies that created the United States were colonies. They were colonies of the British Empire, right? It was just the Northwest Territories, these five states, including Wisconsin, that were actually created originally as democracies in the whole history of the world. So that's kind of a really cool thing. And the reason that I think the state soup mentioned it is that a lot of the values of that revolutionary era, that constitutional era, made their way into the Wisconsin state constitution. And I think a lot of us believe that our public schools in Wisconsin, how do I say this? That we get whatever public schools the lawmakers decide upon, right? The legislature and the governor, but it's not really true. There is a constitutional standard for our Wisconsin public schools, and it's a pretty high standard. And occasionally, like every 25 years or so, that constitutionality gets tested. So, just a little history on where we are here in Wisconsin. So, a unique tribute to Wisconsin there and the other four other states. So, all right, history lesson is now officially over. Now we can get on to something a little more newsy. We're going to start with the projected state budget surplus and what all this means. This has been, I think, out in the news and since about the middle of January. And here is your slide. And so first of all, good morning, and how are
Good
you?
morning. Hi, everybody.
Okay, tell us what you know.
Yeah, so I think it was week ago, week and a half ago. January is a total blur, but the Legislative Fiscal Bureau came out with updated projections of the surplus that we have in the 25-27 biennium. When the budget was passed, we were left, based on all the spending that they decided on, our $4.3 billion budget was whittled down to about 770 million. So it was done. It was sort of done away with. And all of a sudden, based on mainly updated projections on income and corporate taxes, the surplus has grown considerably. It's up to 2.37 billion, which is 1.53 billion more than was originally projected. And that from insider sources is a pretty stable number. It's not, that is expected to be like, we can largely count on that. That's not really that speculative. So that's great. And then the question is, this sort of presents an advocacy opportunity. Of course, everybody's going to say we need to spend that surplus on what we want, right? So in K-12 world, it's been a bit of a swirl of a little bit of a cat herding situation where you've got people in the K-12 world a little bit scattered on what we should do with that. I mean, initially what happened is the governor came out and said we should use it for basically property tax and also special ed, sort of property tax, and by the way, special ed, and by the way, a bunch of other stuff. And then, legislative leaders are saying other things. Legislative Republicans are saying we really shouldn't spend that. We've got all these uncertain things going on, based on the federal budget and Medicaid, and then, kind of built into all this is what happened after the state budget when the legislature didn't put general aid in the pot, as we predicted. Many people's property tax bills got really big in December, and there was this big outcry, of the legislative side, and so I'll wrap this slide up to say, remember our number one priority in the K-12 world for what we felt was needed in the budget was special education. We said inflationary revenue limit as well. We got the 325, which wasn't inflationary, but it was, a sizable increase in revenue limit. But the main priority we were all united around was K-12, was special education. And the other kind of wrinkle in all of this was that what was sort of trumpeted as a huge win, a bipartisan win in the budget, was that they brought special education up to 42% reimbursement rate in the first year and 45% the second year. A few weeks later, or however many, a little bit of time later, we hear from DPI that it's really projected to be more like 35%. So our priority right now, after kind of talking this through in the advocacy world, and amongst WASBO people and school leaders, we need to focus on special education. So that's sort of the messaging we need to come around. We've got a very little bit of time left in the session. And this presents a huge opportunity for K-12 leaders to say, we need to shore up what is already in the budget for special education aid. So at minimum, this surplus should address that shortfall between 35%-ish and 42 and 45. Pete Grender did some number crunching to help us understand what that would mean in dollar terms. And so the estimate is that we would need about 70 million in 25-26, 114 million in 26-27 to get up to 45%. And so for a total of 184 million to shore up what is already in state law, and sort of that being the advocacy push to sort of say, this isn't really negotiable. We're not trying to litigate the whole budget all over again. We're just saying we need to make good on the promise of the budget.
Okay. Yeah, I do. I think a couple things. And first, I think almost all the K-12 leaders are coalescing around the idea of if there is an opportunity here, let's just keep it simple and focus on special ed categorical aid.
Yes.
Which I think is a really smart thing to do. And secondly, thank you to Pete, the predictor, for getting these numbers to us. Also, I think even though we tried to warn everybody, I think a lot of districts maybe over budgeted. They trusted that 42% reimbursement number, and now they're kind of in a tough spot. So DPI is currently paying out at 35% reimbursement. It looks like it'll probably increase, probably closer to 37 or 38 by the time it's all said and done, but very well short of the 42. So yeah, I hope they really focus on that. I feel like there's almost sort of an IOU there, because
That's sort of the
42%
way we're
is,
framing it. Yeah.
yeah, okay. So in your districts, if you hear about this, you know that most of K-12 is looking at this and thinking, yeah, let's go with special ed as our priority. But like you said, there's a lot of competing priorities out there.
Yeah.
The road builders and everybody else, right?
Exactly. So that's
Okay.
sort of where we fell sort of,
Yeah.
this should be non-negotiable. It's already in the budget. I just wanted to make a quick mention that WASBO is going to work on a very short statement to put out that you can all use to help you advocate. If you want to be reaching out to your board members and your legislators about what to do about this, we're going to try to put something out as a resource.
Sure. Okay. Well, don't
It's
spend it yet,
interesting.
everybody.
It is
Brian?
interesting if you read the articles and stuff, even from the governor's office. They talk about more equalization aid as more spendable money for the districts that we need. And it's like I don't
Yeah,
understand
right.
how the governor's office doesn't understand that,
They understand.
buying down property taxes isn't giving money to schools and it's giving money to taxpayers.
Boy,
They
Yep.
that's
might
a
as well just do
That
another
that's
income
that's
tax,
this right.
break.
That's the swirl. I mean, most of the conversation amongst leaders has been around property tax relief as opposed to money for schools. And so that this push toward helping people focus on special ed,
yeah.
if local districts want to use that extra money to help with a property tax relief, that can be a local decision. That's the beauty of special ed.
You should just put the billion
Um,
dollars in special ed. I mean, we all took the hit for property
Yeah,
taxes already.
100%. Yeah, I
there
mean, we
was a
were
lot of
asking for 60%. Like,
right,
and that shouldn't be unreasonable. So to
right.
say we're really just saying 42, 45, that should be like completely reasonable.
That's yeah, there's your minimum. And it's only what 10% of this surplus.
Yeah, there's a lot of money
So
left over. Yeah.
I should mention there was also a lot of tax relief in the 25-27 state budget. It's one of the reasons the big surplus came down as low as it
It
did.
was just income tax,
But it was
right?
on the income tax side. Yeah, so
Tons
it's
of
not
property tax relief. That's where the surplus largely went,
that's
right?
right. It all
Yeah,
went to the income tax side. So
right. And then
okay.
they're not talking about that. Yeah. Anyway.
So this issue, like Ann said, is going to be pretty intense, I think, for a short period of time. And then there's either going to be action or there's not. Um, so stay tuned on state surplus. Okay, let's speaking of state lawmakers, this slide wins our slide award of the day competition for the coolest looking slide, Danielle. Flexing out your AI slide design skills here. So we do this presentation maybe once a year. I love this presentation for school business managers because this is the one that says, here's all the stuff that's coming through teaching and learning and instruction that could impact your budget.
Yeah.
If you're a business manager, right, you always hated it when the director of instruction would wander into your office around the middle of May and say, of course, that we're going to need an extra $500,000 for fill in the blank. And you'd be like, what? What's that all about? So, so we have this, I think we're doing this in spring or accounting, where we talk about what's coming through um, the sort of lawmaking regulatory process that affects instruction, that affects your budget. Take it away, Danielle.
Yeah, I'll throw my whole slide deck from this presentation into the chat here in just a minute. But and thank you to Nick Rykoff who helped present on this
Yes.
at State Ed last week. And so I wanted to just pull out a couple of items that I thought were noteworthy for the whole group. There's more in the slide deck that we talked about, but yeah, as Mike mentioned, we're going to try it like spring and fall to have this as sort of a standing session where you can kind of come and see what's happening on the teaching and learning side of the hallway and what's going to be the budget impact of those things. So just a couple of things we wanted to highlight that we talked about last week with board members. And I always say this is the presentation that superintendents hate because their business managers, their board members are going to be texting them during that presentation being like, hey, are we doing this? Where are we at with this?
Right.
But that's kind of the point of it is to make sure like you have
Yeah.
something happening with these things. So Act 20, we've heard about Act 20 now for, quite a long time. The only reason we still put Act 20 on this presentation is because there are just kind of never ending costs with this that are still going on right now. In particular, professional development. There are required professional developments. There are some free ones that are out there. Your district needs to have a plan because it's regulatory that they do to get all of your K-3 teachers and administrators up to speed with what they need to do with Act 20, but those professional development costs are on top of likely already really expensive costs that you probably had for the resource itself if you needed to make a resource change. So Act 20 isn't like done in the sense that you bought the resource and now we're good. Like one, that resource is going to need to get renewed probably in 5 years, so you're already probably creeping up on, that happening in the next couple of years. And this professional development. And the thing is that you can't use title dollars for professional development around Act 20 because you can't use federal dollars for state legislated items. And so if you were hoping to be able to use Title II or Title IV dollars, you can't with Act 20. So just a piece to kind of keep in mind there. Get kids ready. I know we had a Money Talks. You guys talked about this a little bit a couple of months ago. This is the whole 4K program, right, with the new legislation that allows childcare daycare centers to be able to get some reimbursement, which probably is more than maybe what your agreement is with a school district if you have daycare 4K provided services. And so this has required, some districts to go back and renegotiate with their daycares. Andy, I think did you guys have to do this in Oregon?
Yeah, we were actually successful in getting them to kind of stay with us for a year.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a deadline around this, isn't there? Like right around now?
Yeah, I think it's February. Is it February 1st?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's right around. Yeah, it's pretty soon here. So I have heard districts being really successful with their daycare providers. I think the biggest thing is this is known to be for 1 year for the daycares. It's not known beyond that, and I think that's been a good negotiating point for those districts. So this is one of those, like, it's either $1 sign and that like it's not costing you next to anything because you might have 4K already in-house. Or it could get a little expensive here if you're having to renegotiate. So, we like to put how many dollar signs is this costing us, just like at a restaurant menu. But yeah, like if you have 4K out in the daycare facilities, hopefully this is one you've been noting and working on. And then the last legislative piece I wanted to talk about was Act 57. This one doesn't necessarily cost you much, but make sure your district has something going on with this. This is new legislation around reporting deadlines. If there is any type of staff member engaging in misconduct with students, there are really tight timelines, like the same day or within like 24 hours, you have to report it to parents. You could get yourself into some legislative legal fees here if you're not adhering to those timelines. So again, as a business manager, this is one of those where it's like, it shouldn't cost you much, but you could get some legal fees that are a little unexpected because your administrators are needing to call and verify that they're doing this by the books. And of course, if they don't do it by the books, this could start to cost you money. So again, one of those like check-ins. Do you guys got a plan for how your principals are managing this kind of a thing? So that's why we bring this one up.
You better do some PD around that too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so again, this one might cost you some money to bring in your lawyer, for your administrative team to make sure everybody's on point with it. And stuff. Then just a couple of things around the learning environment. These are things that have been out for a long time in the last 5 years. Mental health services, STEAM education, these are pricey, expensive things. The one thing I wanted to note about mental health is that you'll start seeing some data. You might be even hearing your own folks saying things are getting a little better. It depends on your context. Certainly, there are going to be places that you would say things aren't better at all with staff and student mental health services. But there are a lot of places where they're not pre-COVID, but they are improving. And so we bring this up to really say, stay the course on this. This would be one of those areas where if you're facing budget cuts, you might go, you know what, things are better. We don't need that social worker now. We don't need that extra counselor now. We don't need that extra school psychologist. And I would just kind of teaching and learning folks are going to push back on that one because if things are getting better, that means the services they've put in place are working, right? And so if you remove those services, things could go, sideways on you again. So I would just say really proceed with caution around mental health services and, changing if you're seeing things going all right right now. So that's what you're going to hear from your teaching and learning folks, which is why we do this presentation. This is the like, what are teaching and learning folks going to say to you?
Right.
Thinking about it now before before that person comes into your office and and drops this grand idea on you and stuff. So, and of
Mhm.
course, STEAM education, that's just like the most trending teaching and learning strategy. There's a lot around that topic, right? And again, I'll throw the slide deck in there so you can see the notes on that one, but it's expensive. But certainly it is where things are going right now. Lots of folks have done capital improvements to improve their kind of STEAM areas of their schools. A lot of good career opportunities for students in that area.
Tough to get a lot of that done on $325 per kid. But Brian, Andy, any comments about all this?
The only thing I would say is health insurance. It, it, it
Yes.
it's it, it's out there and it's increasing fairly drastically, and I
Yeah.
think that's going to be our challenge to try to fund everything,
Sure.
right? It's
Mhm.
every year. So, but
In
it,
other
it
words, yeah, unfortunately, health insurance kind of cuts in front of some of these other things, whether we like it or
yeah.
not.
The
Brian?
other the other thing I'll just quickly mention
Yeah.
is because it's a nice funding source for us is dual credit courses.
Mhm.
There's a nice reimbursement for that if you can get your
Yep.
students with dual credit, and that can
Yep.
help fund some of your capital expansion or capital needs for that STEM stuff. That's one of the things that we use is we segment that and put it aside for those purposes.
Yeah, that CT incentive grant, you should really be picking and choosing programming that allows you to get that incentive grant. Now, of course, that grant, the more people that apply for it, the lesser the amount is, but it's been pretty stable for, oh gosh, that's been around for almost a decade now. And
Yeah.
it's been pretty stable about the amount of money that you get per student. And it's definitely that's a really good source. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Andy.
I love the list, and I hope that we grow it out because, we're asked pretty regularly, what kind of legislation or, what's making things cost more all the time. And if we have something like this right at our fingertips, it's easier to answer and not forget any of those things. But I mean, this is a tiny fraction of the list that is out there. So it'd just be
Right.
nice to get it more developed and so we have all those things on the top of our heads when we're asked.
Right.
Yeah,
So
when
if
we're presenting this too, like if we're doing it in fall and spring, some of the things that we include, like I said, this isn't everything, but some of the things we include too is just stuff that's also going to be stressing out your teaching and learning side of the house, right? That,
right.
teaching and learning, like they forget that like October 15th is like a really stressful day in the business office or leading up to October 15th, right? You guys have like, there's cycles of that. There's that opposite side. So sometimes we provide that information too, just to be able to say like, hey, if somebody's, freaking out, this might be why, so
Okay. Okay. Well, thanks, Danielle. And if you're waiting for the next slide to show the new funding streams to pay for this, sorry, there is no next slide with the funding stream to pay for this. That's Brian's point. Okay, back to Anne. Thank you, Danielle. Okay, federal government, I feel like this is such a roller coaster. What's the latest? We can't hear you, Anne.
Wow, how many times does that have to happen? I
Rookie
would think
move. Come on.
we could talk about a lot of things, but the very top thing on everybody's mind is this looming federal budget deadline, which is today. And so what's going on with the federal funding for that will be in schools in the 26-27 school year. That's the federal 26 year. Uh, and so it's looking pretty good, despite all of the chaos and disruption and that's been going on as far as federal funding and federal policy has gone. When it all has shaken out, we saw last week Congress passed a bipartisan bill that included the education funding, and it is pretty much the best case scenario we could have hoped for. It avoided all the deep cuts that were proposed by the Trump administration and the House, and it pretty much came in where the Senate was, which was more of a traditional bipartisan federal budget. It's not like a huge increase, but it keeps things pretty level. So the most important areas, for education are Title I, IDEA. Then there's also REAP and Impact Aid got little increases. And then Title II, Title III, Title IV were all level funded. So, and that was very much a bipartisan agreement. So now the process is the whole rest of the federal budget's got to get passed by today to avoid a federal shutdown. And we're moving very incrementally closer and closer to that. And I mean, like, I'm literally updating this morning. So last night, the Senate came to an agreement about almost all of the federal budget, but they were able to separate out Department of Homeland Security for a separate continuing resolution, because that was kind of the big sticking point, the ICE funding. But Lindsey Graham kind of held up the works from the Senate voting on it. We don't need to get into the processes, but so last night there was a kind of a deal on the table. Trump has been working with the Senate Democrats, and Trump is basically saying, let's get this thing passed. And the House is not in session until Monday. So the Senate is likely going to pass something, hopefully today, pass it off to the House. The House has said, we're going to pass it. We're going to go forward. So there might be a little bit of a shutdown over this weekend because we're waiting on the House because they won't be in session until Monday. But anyway, that's the sausage making.
Okay.
But anyway,
Okay.
what's going to come out for education for 26-27 school year is going to look pretty good. It's pretty much level funded for the main areas of funding. Somebody was asking about mental health funding and some of the smaller things going on. There's more things up in the air, but for the things we really worry about, Title I, IDEA, it's looking about as good as we could expect, pretty level.
Okay, that's the big takeaway, I think. So
That's the big takeaway.
26, 27. So you're building your budget this late winter, spring. Brian, Andy, would you feel reasonably safe kind of going with steady level kind of funding placeholders?
Feeling a lot better now than we were a few months ago. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Well, we wrote them a letter saying we had money talks scheduled for today and we wanted this wrapped up.
And then Lindsey
So
Graham.
so get after it. Yeah. Well, we're going to have to give him a very disapproving email.
Kick.
So
But
if somebody's flying home on a Saturday, and are we okay or
Well, TSA is not part of it, I don't
okay?
think. I mean, they have to work. They might be part of the funding shutdown, but I think you'll be okay. I hope.
But it'd be
Traffic
horrible to get
controllers.
stuck. Yeah.
hypothetical
Okay.
question. Hypothetical question from Andy. Okay. Well, Ann, that's pretty good news. Thank you for
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Okay. So, and stick around. We got another topic for you. Down at State Ed Convention, you presented on the price of parallel systems, meaning public and the voucher kind of conundrum. Um, can you give us just always very popular session? Can you give us a little summary of the highlights of this issue and where it stands?
Yeah, I'll talk about the highlights. The sort of the meat of what we talked about was, we fund voucher and independent charter schools in a certain way right now, and it's very much a state and local share. It works differently than the way we fund public schools, but it still is a state and local share. It involves both property taxes and state funding. It does have a major impact every year for school districts because they have to levy for the voucher funding in the current year. And
Right.
so there've been proposals a couple different times to change the way we fund private and voucher schools to something that's just put it all on 100% GPR, just take it completely out of the state and local share situation and allow it to be funded with 100% GPR. And we have written and talked pretty extensively about what that might mean. And we've tried to paint a picture of the long-term impacts of that based on what we've learned from what's happened in other states in terms of how voucher programs have really skyrocketed in growth and cost across the country and within certain states in the last like 2 to 3 years. I mean, it has really accelerated. And our point is moving this funding mechanism to 100% GPR would help facilitate growth of voucher costs in Wisconsin. That doesn't necessarily mean we should or shouldn't, use this alternative funding mechanism, but our point is that policymakers need to take into account these long-term impacts, even though it will be kind of on a short-term basis. It will feel like a relief to local school districts, but on a long-term basis, in the sense that it could hide public school funding, it could hide public spending on voucher schools in such a way that it could start to crowd out funding for public education and even funding for other state priorities at the state budget level. That's sort of the biggest takeaway. You can go to the next slide.
Okay. Yeah, by the way, WASB, the convention, state convention has what they call a delegate assembly, right? Which was like this little forum of school board members voting on resolutions. It seems like this item has come up a couple of times in the last 2 years.
Yeah. So they vote this. It was there was a proposal last year at state ed. Somebody put a proposal forward to oppose, to support decoupling, so to change the funding mechanism, and that was voted down. This year there was an unusual situation where they had two resolutions, one to oppose decoupling and one to support decoupling. The long and the short of it is the way the voting shook out, they affirmed this idea that we oppose decoupling. They want to keep the funding mechanism. The votes shook out in favor of keeping the mechanism the way it is. So I'll stop there. So that's interesting. So I'm not going to go through everything I said during that presentation. I just wanted to share with you all some interesting visuals about this growth nationally around private voucher programs, and specifically voucher programs that are considered universal. I just thought it was interesting to share with you that universal can mean a lot of things depending on the state and what the policies are. There's universal eligibility, which is that every K-12 student can qualify to participate. There's universal usage, which is basically allowing families to kind of spend their voucher on all kinds of things, not just tuition for a private school. There's universal funding, which means that all qualified students receive guaranteed funding, and we actually have a version of that already in Wisconsin. Our special needs voucher program is universal funding. Anyone who qualifies gets it. There's no income or enrollment caps in that program. And then there's true universal, which is kind of all the things, all the different kinds of universal. So I wanted to share with you this map that shows how universal funding shakes out across the country and how many states have it. And, the ones with the yellow star have all the kinds, all the universal. And you'll see that Arizona and Florida fall in that category, a couple other states as well.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. So in terms of a couple different little case studies and why we say like Wisconsin really needs to look at what's happening in other states when we're considering ways to change the way we do voucher funding in Wisconsin. We need to look at other states to see if we can learn and avoid some of the pitfalls that they've fallen into as they've changed their funding mechanisms and expanded the costs. And we've been pointing to Florida and Arizona because the impacts of voucher growth there have been very pronounced. So Florida is the largest voucher program. It's really, really grown very fast. It's doubled in size just since 2022. And it turned a state surplus into a big budget deficit, a $6.9 billion budget deficit. So this has impacts not just for public education, but for the state budget as a whole. So that's a big red flag that I'm saying, that we're saying policymakers need to pay attention to. And then Arizona is the first universal program. Their costs also were really underestimated when their legislature passed this expansion into a universal program. It turned out to be $738 million when it was launched instead of a projected 97 million, and it's up to $1 billion last year. Again, they projected a deficit at the state level largely due to vouchers. And the impacts on their public schools that have been attributed to voucher growth have been pretty dire, like lots of closures and lots of school closures and program closures. And so these are sort of cautionary tales that are kind of poster children, but this is happening in other states as well. And even though this is happening, a lot of states are passing legislation to change their voucher programs to universal.
Yeah.
So you can
Okay, I think we got one more
next
slide
slide.
on. Whoop.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I may have missed a slide, Anne.
Yeah, there's a
Um,
couple.
but I wanted to just make at a point. I just want to ask Brian and Andy, how big a deal is this in your school districts, and what's the local conversation sound like?
Our board members asked, based on discussions, I think in Milwaukee last week, if we could start trying to figure out a way to get it on our tax bills. It's an exponential increase. It's not huge to us, but it's going to be huge. So it's increasing by, I want to say about 100 grand a year, something like that. But that could turn into a couple hundred grand a year pretty soon.
For sure.
Yeah,
Brian?
and our board is focused on it also, and our municipality actually came to us stating that they'd like to get it on the tax bill. But I did just a couple days ago, got an email from Will, it's their newsletter, and their solution for property tax is just to decouple, because then they'll take it off the tax roll and property taxes will go down. So I'm not sure if maybe the last state budget wasn't totally planned to have this magical
Yeah,
fix for property taxes by removing this other system off the tax bill.
it certainly helps them make their case. Yeah, but so the slide, there was a slide that sort of showed the exponential growth in national funding on voucher schools, which is kind of crazy. But the main takeaway from the presentation was what we're asking is policymakers to consider how this is, if they want to decouple, this is going to make it easier to expand. And if they want this is going to become an entitlement program that lawmakers will not be able to kind of keep their arms around. So we're asking them to say, how are you going to pay for it? That's why we call it parallel systems. How are you going to sustain that entitlement program without harming public education and all the rest of our state priorities? Like, let's grapple with that if that's the direction you want to go.
Okay. It's not the last time we're going to talk about voucher funding, that's for sure. Oh, quick infomercial. Lots of WASBO University courses are starting up this time of year. So winter break is over. Get back to campus and check out some of these courses. We've got some great people teaching these classes, as you can see, real experts, and what a great opportunity. I think a lot of us think, gee, if we'd had this in our first few years, we'd have probably slept a lot better. Okay, so there's your WASP. And thank you, Anne, by the way. We did a different presentation at State Ed on uh, how school boards can oversee financials. And then CISA 5, which is why Mike is with us, Mike Koltes, did sort of a companion piece. And we're always surprised at how many people are in the room when we do this presentation. And I think the root of it is that if you are a new or new-ish school board member, the thing that keeps you up at night is this fear of being blindsided by some kind of a financial um, you or emergency or a financial something with a whiff of scandal or a huge budget overrun that cuts the fund balance down to next to nothing. The kind of stories that we saw in various school districts around the state in the last year or two. So board members are like, look, in many cases they don't have a financial background. They certainly don't have school finance background, and they're just kind of sitting on top of this, rocket, right? And they're thinking, oh my gosh, how do I know that my school district isn't gonna be the next one that has a big financial blow up? And so that's why they're just super motivated to know about these things. So we've worked with WASB and to giving out some guidelines around this. And I'll just show you one just to give you a flavor for it. I think this has been out for about a year and a half. I think there are 10 benchmarks. This one is just we picked it because it's timely. Um, this one says, look, when you get your audited financial statements, as many of you have just gotten them in the last few weeks, make sure that you have them on a board agenda. Make sure you have your auditor there. Make sure your board members can ask questions like, how are we doing? Should we be nervous? Your board should vote to acknowledge receipt of the audited financial statements. You should make sure the board gets the management letter, the one that points out whether you've got internal control weaknesses, which an awful lot of us have. And that's just one. It's just one way board members can manage their uncertainty and their nervousness around school finance, and also help them be good stewards. So that's the WASB part of this. But Mike and his team at CISA 5 have kind of taken this and run with it. Mike, you want to talk about that for a minute?
Sounds good. Yeah, thanks, Mike. And first off, Mike, I owe you a round of applause because I forgot to, when I introduced you last week at the business meeting, I didn't give you a round of applause. So just like everybody to give him a round of applause. Thank you, Mike, for
Yeah.
doing this today. I appreciate that. I saw some claps go up, so thank you, audience. Yeah, look at that.
The loneliest 5 seconds of my life. Dead silence when you introduced me.
No, thank you. I pasted in the chat a Google Doc that we have put together in response to this. So like the item that Mike has here around presenting your audited financial statements to your board, that's one of the items on the spreadsheet I shared. The spreadsheet is just basically a way for you to organize, like there's a few different tabs. There's a summary tab that you could present to your board around where you're at with like one big ticket item that's in this benchmark area is compliance. So state reporting specifically, being able to take a look at all the state reports that are due kind of by month and then check those off as being completed. And then kind of having a summary that you could provide to your board to say, here's where we're at in terms of the state reporting year, and we're compliant based on the current month that we're in. So it's sort of a monthly checklist to get you started with some of these areas. There's a tab in there about bank reconciliation. There's a tab in there about grants, and then there's kind of an other tab, which again, on that other tab, there's a task in here for making sure that you present your audited financial statements to your school board as a priority. There's other things in there as well, depending on what kind of type of school district you are, around making sure you post your budget publication and or tax levy in your newspaper with the appropriate deadlines that are in state statute. So just a number of items like that. It's not all inclusive. It's just a good starting point. And it was just something that we wanted to share with the profession to be able to start working towards meeting some of the benchmarks that were put forth in this particular document.
Yeah, super important now that, it used to be school finance kind of stop with the board, but now with everybody going to operating referendum so often, this kind of transparency and clarity, public accountability, I think is super important.
It is interesting when you roll this stuff out to the board, depending on how long you do it and how the board sees you. I mean, I've gotten like weird react, like why do we need this? Like, What's wrong with the district? Like, are we going broke? Like, why are you telling me all this? Like, when you say best practice, they're like, yeah, what else? Like, um, just kind of interesting. And you talk about the transparency for the community and everyone else, not just the board. And
Yeah.
it's just been interesting rolling it out.
Yeah. Andy, it's been, you know, your board is used to getting really good financial reporting, so it's probably nothing new there.
Yeah, we don't do the scorecard thing, and so I'm actually texting back home and saying, "Hey, is that something we should maybe think about?" But we do all kinds of graphs and try to talk about cash flow as well as, just where we are obviously at the end of each year.
Yeah, I think the School Boards Association is just trying to set like a minimum standard for financial competence, right? Again, they're going back to this idea of we don't want to be blindsided. And so, what are some common sense things you can do to make sure you're monitoring the financial health? So, um, so Mike's got a great solution. It's in the chat. So check that out if you have a chance. Okay, so then I wanted to make sure we did this last one in the kitchen with Brian. So if you are a regular participant in Money Talks or our conferences, you know Brian is sort of our leading champion of seeing school lunch not just as a cost or as a potential drain on your budget, but as something really positive and worth doing well. So this session was 8 o'clock Friday morning, and I went there thinking that Brian would have samples, like maybe French toast sticks, which would have been nice. Um, but no, no food. Um, but Brian was in his familiar role as a champion of school nutrition. So Brian, here's your chance.
Like that session was interesting because I was betting that we'd have 3 to 5 people there, and it was probably actually 30 to 40 people there. And I also learned that you need to
Right.
be careful with what you say because of your audience in there, like, talking about milk and having dairy farmers there, like probably not good to be, talking about how people really don't drink milk anymore. Because dairy
Yeah,
farmers don't like
I
that.
could I could
You
see
know,
that being a problem. Yeah.
so no, I mean, it was just interesting. It was a great session. Just talking about, how meals are important, like breakfast programs, like breakfast in the classroom helps with attendance and truancy. I mean, kids do come to school for that stuff because they're not getting it elsewhere. So it is much more than that. And obviously, I always say too, make sure you have a good relationship with your food service director. And then on the financial side, there's an interesting study which I got made fun of because they said they had to do a study to say that having nutritious meals would help kids out academically. And I said, yeah, they did have to do a study for that because people just wouldn't believe it. But New York Public School did one on they did a universal free meal that wasn't CEP at the time, and they just showed that academically everything went up. Their attendance was much better after they did universally free, just because it takes the stigma out of everything. Um, and
Mm.
yeah, and then last part of the session was just maintaining or monitoring your financial aspect of your program. But it really got into like breakfast in the classroom and what you serve, the specific types of meals, how it's not like all like cereal bars and stuff. And Mike told me I can't talk about French toast because with French toast, then there's syrup, and I guess that's a four-letter word, which isn't a four-letter word for teachers. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Teachers, teachers who have to spend 15 minutes trying to get maple syrup off of kids' snow pants is one of the leading challenges in elementary instruction in this state. So yeah, you got to be careful, Brian.
Yeah. But I mean, it was great, and it just talked about bringing everyone to the table, whether that's custodians, your facility people, and your principals and your teachers, and just explaining what's what we can do for kids, and you can take the burden off the teachers, or you can have them do it, and classrooms can remain clean. I was in a kindergarten room that all the kindergartners were able to open up a carton of milk. But then in a third grade room, like all the milk was spilled all over the place. Like I don't understand how that works, but you know,
Well, yeah, you do.
I'm just the
You are.
business guy. Like I don't know.
Well, Brian, you are again kind of our leading champion for school nutrition. You do a great job with it. I think you're. Are you going to do this presentation for us in spring or?
I think I did it in the fall.
You did it? Okay. Well, we'll have to have you come back and do it again. There's very little in the preparation for most of us who become business officials that has anything to do with food service. We don't know anything, right? So you kind of learn on the job. And if you're in that position, going to Brian's sessions is a great way to get up to speed. We're
And
going
it's
to end
also
with
one
a,
it's one area too that we haven't been able to get a ton of help from DPI for whatever reason.
yeah, it seems like because it's a federal program, they're just so stuck in compliance world, you know? Um, so many rules. My goodness. We could become like sort of a prisoner of our rules in food
Yeah.
service sometimes. Um, Stop making sense. Um, like the spork. You know how many rules there are on sporks? And anyway, we don't have time for that. Okay, so I want to mention starting this Monday is the facility maintenance session, and I think we've got these slides on like auto advance. But if you want to reward your facility director for getting you through December, January, great opportunity to do that. Um, Send them up to the Kalahari um, on on Monday for a day and a half of PD. It's a great opportunity. Don't forget about federal funding. This almost always sells out. That's coming up later in February. And Rachel and Shelley from DPI do a fantastic job. And then the accounting conference, the conference that counts. You like what Ryan did with the little calculator there, where it says accounting across the top? Um, Very cool, Ryan. So we'll be in La Crosse of all places in March. So great opportunity to network and see everybody and find out what's going on for 26, 27 at the accounting conference. So I think with that, guys, we're a little late. I just want to say thank you again. Thank you to all of our operations people. Um, you think about how much good a good business office and operations team can do for a school district with energy management this time of year, with slips, trips, and falls, with snow removal, right? With getting the opening up of your gyms for the old folks to come in and walk around. There's a million things you can do. And then our folks are great at it. So thank you for doing that. And anything else, Brian, Andy, Mike, Danielle, Ann?
No.
I'm
Looks like
looking forward to
not. Well,
February.
yeah, let's go. February on Sunday. It's a big win for all of us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.